Hey out there, legal warriors. What parents need to know if you have a child in the juvenile court system. Are you interested in this area of the law? Stay tuned. This is the video for you. My name is Attorney Lance Fryrear. I'm a defense attorney in Lynnwood, Washington. My law firm's been defending people charged with crimes all throughout Washington state for more than 20 years. I'm putting out these videos to help educate the public. So if you find this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people get the help they need. I'm just going to jump right into it. You know, there isn't that much information about juvenile court out there, at least not in Washington state. I even checked my own channel yesterday when someone came in to hire my firm for a juvenile case to try to see, hey, what specifically have I put out on juvenile court? And I haven't done that much. And that's really interesting because my first ever job was as a juvenile prosecutor 30 years ago or so. And so I know quite a bit about it. So in this video, I'm going to try to cover just a few things I think are important for parents to know and for the juvenile offenders to realize when we go to juvenile court. So number one, in general, what's the difference between juvenile court and adult court? Well, there's a difference in focus. Adult court, the suspect is called a defendant, and it's a little bit about retribution. It's a little bit about punishment. Okay, and all criminal court has some element of punishment, but in juvenile court, it's more thought about the services that the juvenile court can offer the respondent. You hear what I said? Respondent, not defendant. In juvenile court, the suspect is called a respondent. Just one little thing that shows it's a little bit of a different mindset. Now, don't get me wrong, juveniles can get jail time and serious punishment. That's for very serious crimes. But for the most part, the court is sort of looking at it from a service standpoint. You know, hey, they're still trying to plead you guilty. They'll still do things to you, but they might be more likely to have you do community service or have you do counseling or therapy or keep you in school. It all varies, okay, versus how serious the situation is. But think about juvenile court as a place that is meant to be therapeutic and provide rehabilitation, not necessarily retribution, and not necessarily punishment. So what controls whether something goes to juvenile court or adult court? Well, for the most part, it's the age of the offender. It's the age of the offender at the time the case is charged. So this is not every situation. For the most part, someone under 18 will, with a criminal situation, will be referred to the juvenile court. Referred means it's typically going to get sent to the prosecutor on a referral. You might hear a police officer say that, for the prosecutor to decide what to do. The exception is if you're 16 or 17, if the offender is 16 or 17 and it's a traffic offense, that goes to adult court automatically. Reckless driving, DUI, stuff like that. There are certain levels of very serious charges, murders and such, that could get declined from juvenile court into adult court, and that's based upon many factors, including was the juvenile sort of living like an adult? Were they living on their own? Do they have a job at McDonald's? Stuff like that. But for the most part, if you're under 18 at the time the case is charged, it's going to be in juvenile court, except for some of those exceptions, or there's some others. What do you mean at the time the case is charged, Lance? I mean, what if it happens when I'm 17 and a half? Wouldn't I go to juvenile court? Not necessarily. If your child or the offender is close to 18, you need an attorney right now, okay? Because if the prosecutor doesn't get around to charging the case or deciding on the case until the offender turns 18, once the kid turns 18, if it's not charged, jurisdiction is lost. Doesn't matter. They could have been 16 and a half at the time. If they don't get to it till they're 18, jurisdiction is lost, and now we're in adult court, and we don't want it in adult court, right? Adult court's about punishment, right? Adult court stays on your record forever, stuff like that. Not necessarily, but it's way worse, okay? So if someone's near 18, they're 17 and a half, 17 and 3/4, 17, make sure you've got an attorney who can, at the appropriate time, put some pressure on the prosecutor to make a decision one way or another before your child turns 18. So let's imagine a case now. Let's move on. And we're in the juvenile court. How else is juvenile court different? Well, in juvenile court, there's no right to a jury trial. And there's not even really the word trial. In adult court, you see trials with jurors, and the jurors decide what happened. Well, typically in juvenile court in Washington State, they call a trial a fact finding. Okay, and it's a fact finding where there is the right to a fact finding, but it's a judge only who decides guilt or innocence. So if a case gets to what we would consider a trial, we don't have a right to a jury. So that changes a lot of possible legal strategies, right? We're not going to probably get jury nullification where the jury feels, the lay people and the jury feel sorry for the respondent and therefore find them not guilty. The judge is typically going to follow the law because they're a judge, right? So that's one thing that's different in juvenile court. And also, there's a role of a parent to play in juvenile court that is not so in adult court. If you're the parent, you're going to be asked to go to court. In fact, the juvenile has to have someone on their side that goes to court with them, a parent, a grandparent, someone like that. So the parent has a role to play that doesn't exist in adult court. What else do you need to know about juvenile court? There's typically what we call a probation officer, and that's totally different than what you would think about in adult court. It's the most inartfully named position, I think, in the juvenile system. We think about a probation officer as post-conviction. It's someone to make sure that we follow up and do things right, and someone we have to report to, and someone we should be afraid of, and it could be an enemy of ours if we're the defendant. Well, that's the totally wrong attitude to take, in my opinion, and the juvenile level. Whoever the probation type person is there prior to there being a conviction, maybe even prior to the arraignment, to sort of figure out what services the family needs or the respondent needs, right? It's a services-based thing. So while it's not advisable to talk about the facts of the case to a court person who I'm calling a probation officer, it is advisable to see them as an asset, as a friend, as an ally who can help your family and help your child, because they have a lot of power in the system to make recommendations. Oftentimes, I feel the probation's recommendations is more powerful than the prosecutors or the defenses. So it's important to get off on the right foot and don't make that human mad at us, right? Because they're just people, but they're there to try to help this youthful supposed offender become better from whatever happened, right? To make the most out of the crisis, to make sure we never need to see them again, to help fix what went wrong. Because that's why we have juvenile court. The whole theory is let's treat a juvenile differently so we can stop a juvenile offender from becoming an adult offender, right? So that's how I want to think about it. And if you're a parent watching this and, hey, my kid is in trouble for some type of crime, but it's not the most serious sounding crime, just a theft or a misdemeanor assault or something, well, realize that they may get referred to diversion. And what's diversion? Diversion is a sort of a program where a case never gets filed in court against the child. Instead, they get an opportunity to go through diversion, which might mean meeting with a diversion counselor, talking about why things happen, talking about what their life is like. And the diversion counselor might say, hey, go do 24 hours of community service and do some therapy. And if you do this by a certain date, we'll just close your file and there's nothing ever filed against you. So if you get diversion, it's usually a good idea to strongly consider that as an option. Rule of thumb is people can get up to 2 diversions, but it's discretionary totally by the prosecution. So most prosecutors will take a look and decide, will I send this to my diversion unit, or will I do nothing with it, or will I prosecute it by filing a charge in court? And if they file the charge in court, that's when you get the summons to appear in court, and it's the full meal deal criminal defense at that point. There are ways where you can get juvenile matters dismissed that aren't necessarily possible to adult level. You can get some felonies dismissed even with something called a deferred disposition. We cover that in one of my videos. The deferred is the word video, I remember. It's basically a guilty finding where if we follow stuff and do things right, pay restitution, that eventually gets dismissed. There's auto sealing for the most part. Once we turn 18, if we've done things successfully, records will get sealed for the most part without us having to do other stuff. That means that in general, the public's not going to see them. Now, if we get new crimes, the records might get unsealed. But there's things that happen in juvenile court to protect the respondent's future to try to enhance the respondent's future that simply don't exist in adult court. Now, that doesn't mean that our kid's just going to get better. Doesn't mean our kid's going to listen to it. You're going to need to listen to your public defender or a private attorney and trying to step through this system, because if you're not used to it as a defense attorney, it's like walking into a whole other world where it's just a whole different way of doing things, a whole different attitude. And so you need some experience, in my opinion, whoever your attorney is, in the juvenile court system to have the best chance to get the most help for your child. And in my opinion, public defenders have all that knowledge if they've been in the juvenile court for a long time. I like most public defenders because they're so skilled and they have such a hard job. And especially, I'll rely on a juvenile public defender to help me sometimes. If I'm retained, I still want to go to that knowledge base, say, hey, what can you tell me about how things are working right now? And, it's just smart to do. We want to reach out to anyone we can ask for help. So that's a little bit about juvenile court. If you're a parent or you're a young person who's facing it, we need to take it seriously. The scoring systems are pretty favorable for possible punishments for juveniles. There's lots of things that are local sanctions, which means limited amount of jail is possible and more likely community service, stuff like that. And it varies locality to locality. That's why it's called local sanctions. So in summary, if you've got a juvenile case, think, hey, it's an opportunity for my child to get better. I want them treated fairly. Maybe it's not all their fault, but remember, there's also some opportunity to improve through the system while protecting our child, while defending our rights, and making sure that it turns out so it's not going to affect our future. So if you found this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people get the help they need. More importantly, if you've got a juvenile case, it's in Washington State, feel free to give my office a call. We'll listen to what happened. We'll identify a way forward, and we will be there for you. Thank you.